we are at FCTV podcast, and I've got a really great guest here with me today. Ramsey Alwin is CEO of the National Council on Aging. It's one of the leading voices helping reshape how we think about aging in America. Ramsey has spent her career advocating for older adults, from economic security and healthcare access to making sure people have the support they need to age well and stay connected. She's testified before Congress, influenced national policy conversations, and is helping drive change for millions of older Americans. Ramsey, welcome, and I'm really excited to talk to you today. So let's just first talk a little bit about what is the National Council on Aging and what are you guys advocating for specifically?
Well, thanks so much for having us. So the National Council on Aging is a national nonprofit advocacy and service delivery organization. We're celebrating our 75th year of social impact.
Great.
We're really proud of our long history, working closely with all the community-based organizations that provide critical services and supports that allow all of us to age well. So think 10,000 senior centers across the country, over 600 area agencies on aging, and thousands of other faith and community-based organizations working to ensure all of us can stay healthy and independent as we age.
And why is broadband important in your advocacy for the organization?
It's absolutely a critical component of living well and aging well, staying connected in community in all of its forms, literally in our communities, but also online is so very essential. Now, we saw this during the pandemic, where overnight it was critical for older adults to remain connected via broadband so that they could connect with their medical providers, with family, with friends, also to stay working for those that want and need to work. So broadband is an essential piece of the puzzle, and it's just as basic as electricity and water for older adults.
Okay. So, you brought up the pandemic, and I think a lot of times when we talk about connectivity and broadband, it's sort of like pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. What surprised you during that period in terms of older adults and their use of the internet and broadband?
Sure. Well, the pandemic was tough for us in many ways because older adults were disproportionately impacted by COVID. However, the silver lining of the experience was it was an incredible accelerant to change and adoption when it came to technology. Again, overnight, older adults were using multiple platforms, Zoom and Teams and Google Meetups, out of necessity. And so it really helped disrupt the stereotype around older adults and technology. The professionals in the field of aging also had to pivot overnight to make sure all those critical services and supports continued to be available to older adults.
Like, give me some examples, like what kinds of things?
So at many senior centers, which is all about community and connection, there are various evidence-based health promotion programs that are made available related to falls prevention and chronic disease management. These are programs like Tai Chi or Matter of Balance. Older adults come into the senior center, they participate in the programs and socialize, and the programs keep them healthy and safe and strong. Well, overnight, the professionals decided we need to keep these programs available, so we're going to deliver them via Zoom, via Google Meetups, via Facebook Live, and older adults loved it and continued to expect that these services would be available both online and in community. We have so many examples of how the in real life experience can easily be translated to online, and that opens up all sorts of other possibilities where, for instance, some of our older adults invite their family members from other states to join.
Oh, that's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would imagine too, my mother-in-law is elderly, and I remember during the pandemic, first of all, I think she became like the healthiest, old person out there because she took up hiking, and because that was something she could do outside and social distance. But she also is an avid bridge player, and so her bridge group started online, and now she's in multiple bridge groups. And one of the things that I've found from her talking to her about all this is that sometimes those groups continue to keep meeting because somebody gets sick in the winter, or we have bad weather. Like on the East Coast, we had so much snow this year that we're not that used to, that like things kept shutting down. So in some ways, do you find like that older community is actually where some of us post-pandemic have gone back to more in-person meetings? We've got the older adults who maybe are still doing it just as much during certain times of years, perhaps even, or just all the time because they can't get out, or they don't want to get out face to face?
Absolutely. There are all sorts of reasons that make it easier to engage online. So in the beginning, many older adults were a bit nervous and concerned about coming back to group settings because of the contagion factor. And to your point, certain seasons, flu season, it's another time of year where it's a little bit safer perhaps to engage virtually. But for others, there might be mobility issues or transportation barriers. And so continuing to have programming available, chair yoga, for instance, you can do chair yoga in a group setting at a senior center, or you could just as easily tune in via your favorite video recording platform and join and get just as much benefit. Book club, storytelling and story capturing. There's a lot of work around life stories that are captured at the senior centers as we age. All of that can be done with the stroke of a key and keep people safer.
Yeah, and even like churches. I know that my church started, with the online mass, and I know people who still tune in, right? Yeah. So, generally we think of like, older Americans, boomers, the boomers, they don't know how to delete things from their phone, and they, have too many pictures but what are some of the myths really about the myth versus reality of older Americans and their use of technology?
Well, there's certainly myths and stereotypes about older adults being Luddites, but the reality is much different.
Okay.
We track Pew charitable survey data in terms of older adult usage, and the numbers are just skyrocketing. Older adults with the time and the resources are very curious to engage. They're super users of generative AI and the varying offers that are available there. They've absolutely embraced video conference calling and social media platforms for that matter. Now, we do a lot of work around educating and empowering older adults to navigate these offerings safely because they are also targets when it comes to some very predatory practices.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So what is the digital literacy piece to this all look like?
Well, it's essential. There still are people who need to get some support to feel empowered to utilize the platform. And there are lots of great opportunities for us to educate and enhance digital literacy with older adults so they feel comfortable using the various platforms available. And then we also try to balance that with healthy education when it comes to what to steer clear of. In particular, we've been focused more recently on financial exploitation and social media platforms. We actually released some research recently after surveying older adults in terms of their social media platform usage and found that individuals are getting inundated by predatory practices, romance scams, grandparent scams, false advertising, attempts to impersonate federal agencies like Medicare and Social Security and IRS. A lot of predators are running amok on social media platforms.
Where it used to be, I guess, people would, be dialing up these older folks and talking to them on the phone. You're seeing this, they're being targeted more online.
They're being targeted online. They're being targeted via text message, via email, but also those social media platforms, in some instances, allow the predators to run amok given their business model. They're allowed to continue to promote and target in very precise ways based on the data.
Again, that in the world of social media that we live in today, there's a lot of information about these people that make it easier for bad actors, I guess, to tailor their scams to them. Is that what you guys are seeing too?
We're all vulnerable to scams, but older adults are an absolute target because there are huge assumptions about the lifetime of savings they've been able to accrue and their social isolation making them a bit more vulnerable. So sadly, the scammers prey upon them and target them pretty regularly.
So you mentioned that the social media platforms sometimes or often allow these bad actors to kind of run amok. Is there anything that your organization is advocating for or trying to work on to not have that be the case?
Absolutely. So for
Okay.
decades, we've provided education to empower and enable older adults to try to steer clear of financial exploitation. And we continue to do that important work with corporate and industry partners that are aligned with us. But we also recognize they are really fighting a pretty incredible battle on their own. And so they may need the help of some regulations and legislation. Frankly, we look to the banking industry and some of the ways the banking industry has put practices in place to minimize some of the risks related to financial exploitation and stop the money before it leaves the account. And we're looking to the social media industry to do the same type of self-regulating, and if not, for Congress to help them. So we had a recent congressional briefing on the research and the data trends in terms of predatory practices on social media platforms to begin to educate Congress of the real concerns. And there's some bipartisan legislation related to consumer protections that would address both the vulnerability of children and older adults.
Okay.
And so we're hopeful that the Scams Act, as it's called, will gain some momentum because there's widespread bipartisan, bicameral understanding
Okay.
that additional protections need to be in place.
What would the Scams Act do? Like what kinds of things are you asking them, the social media platforms? I mean, what are you asking them to do to sort of alleviate some of that?
Well, first and foremost, real-time reporting.
Okay.
Real-time reporting when there are predators and when there are scams. Because when we don't know what's happening, it's really tough to begin to regulate and enforce. So real-time reporting would be critical. Also, verifying that those making purchases for ad buys are real companies, legitimate companies, as opposed to a boiler room overseas that's looking to prey upon vulnerable populations. So just some basics around reporting and verification of businesses would go a very long way.
Yeah, because it does seem a bit like the Wild West. I mean, as you said, everybody can be victim to a
Yes.
scam. But, I mean, I've seen some stuff that's, maybe I'll buy that thing that you're like, wait a minute, that's probably not a real company. How could they possibly be selling something like that cheap, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
being online is a part of our daily routine.
Right.
And it should be. And it should be comfortable and safe. And it should provide an opportunity to connect in a meaningful, safe way.
Right. I want to pivot a little bit to healthcare, right? As we've seen, there have been a lot of cuts federally to programs like Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP. These are programs that hospitals rely on, but also some individuals rely on, particularly older Americans. So, like, how is that affecting sort of healthcare? So, like, example, if hospitals are having to close and people are having to travel further distances, like, are you going to see more telehealth, you think? And how are older Americans going to benefit from the use of that kind of technology?
Well, first and foremost, we advocate on behalf of all the programs all of us rely upon to age well. So Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Older Americans Act, SNAP, those are critical programs that allow us to stay healthy, to stay independent, to stay out of the emergency room, out of the nursing home. Medicaid in particular is critical when it comes to keeping individuals at home as opposed to in a costly nursing home. We're very concerned about deep cuts to Medicaid. We already had a crisis in terms of there being a shortage of direct care workers that can support individuals' ability to age in home with home and community-based services. Medicaid is the only vehicle to pay for home care. Medicare does not cover it.
Okay.
Which is a bit of a surprise for most until they're in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Until you're in the thick of it, it just seems like it would make sense that Medicare would cover home care. But when Medicare was created at the same time as Medicaid, as well as the Older Americans Act, the three pieces of legislation were companions. Medicare was universal health care coverage as we age. Medicaid was long-term care for older adults and individuals with disabilities, largely nursing homes. And then the Older Americans Act, little known piece of legislation, but very, very comprehensive in providing services that keep us at home. Think Meals on Wheels, home delivery, caregiver, and respite care. The recent cuts to Medicaid are going to be devastating. We already had six-figure wait lists for home and community-based services supported by Medicaid. And now governors and state legislatures are going to have to balance the budget. And because Medicaid has a bias toward nursing home or institutional care first, home care will be cut first.
So how can technologies like, high-speed internet access or even AI, how is that going to impact those issues? I mean, can it throw out a lifeline? Will it help?
It will help. It will not solve the whole problem. But for those of us that are fortunate enough to have family to provide some level of care, the new technology innovations go a long way.
Okay.
So when we have remote monitoring devices that allow us to be able to make sure our loved ones are safe, when our loved ones can engage in telehealth, when there are assistive technologies and monitoring devices and wearables that can help us prevent falls or monitor our glucose and our blood pressure, a lot of that can go a long, long way in helping individuals. But it doesn't replace the fact that sometimes you need a direct care worker to come into the home and provide some direct services to help an individual.
Gotcha. But it does seem like it can help lower the cost a little bit in some instances too. Right?
Absolutely.
In terms of like not having to have all that face-to-face time, with a healthcare provider. So, yeah.
And I think it holds a lot of promise in terms of handling some of the aspects of aging at home that don't require a human. So scheduling and monitoring and analysis of data, when we can utilize the technology tools to cover some of those bases, then the remaining tasks can be left to a human. The ability to have the conversations, the difficult conversations about end-of-life plans and needs, those can then be left to the human. And actually last fall, there was a new AI and caregiving challenge launched by the Department of Health and Human Services. It's a modest kitty of funds, several $1 million that are available, and they're inviting applications now for tech firms that are interested in developing new innovations that can better help family caregivers and professional caregivers leverage AI to, again, free up the human to do what's uniquely human and let the technology do the other stuff.
Okay, great. As we wrap up here, I'm just going to give you a final question. As you look ahead, what do you think needs to happen, whether from policymakers, tech companies, or communities themselves, to make sure older Americans aren't just connected, but really empowered by the technology as we look, 10 years ahead?
Well, so the longevity economy, or the 50-plus market, is a $7 trillion market. There's incredible purchasing power. We need to make sure we have the right people in the room that understand the pain points and the realities of aging in America. So those products and services that are created are relevant to the market segment that has the purchasing power.
Well, that is really super interesting. And I'm so glad that you were able to come here and talk to us about it. And I think we need to continue the conversation. I want to hear in the next 5 to 10 years where we are. So thank you for being here at FCTV.